Cool. Okay, so I thought this would be a good intro because we've had loads of new people join recently, and they were asking some really basic questions about how to even save sketches and start new sketches. So I thought this might be quite helpful for anybody who's only just got used to the app. I can see that virtually everybody here already knows how to do all this, so anything I miss out, you can always tell me, and we can add it in as well. So I've got a diagram here which shows a lot of the main features of the canvas that we've got here. So as you see, if I pinch the canvas, you can make the canvas bigger and smaller, and then all the main tools are arrayed across the top. So the top right is probably the most important part, and that's where you can save your sketches, you can start new sketches, you can export your pictures onto your photo reel, you can upload your sketches if you want to the gallery that's online. You can also change the size of the canvas and access the community. I'm not sure if you can, if I go into my gallery, if the stream will continue. So what I've done is I've got an image of what happens if you click the three bars up at the top, those ones. Then what that takes you to is a menu that looks like this, and this is my gallery that I can see when I open it. If you're a brand new user, you'll have nothing there apart from the current sketch you're working on. And what you can see there is the pictures that you may have already produced, and then the option for a new sketch. And so if you click on that new sketch button, then what you get is a picture that looks something like this. And then if you click on any one of those canvases, then that will be your next canvas that you can start to draw on. And so there's some fairly low resolution canvases there, and then on the right the retina ones are slightly higher resolution, and they have fewer layers. And so really that's what Blackboard's introduced to try and avoid the app crashing. So there's fewer layers to work with. There's still plenty of layers there. So whilst we're talking about crashing, I think it's really important to say that the app is actually really stable, and sometimes people have problems when their iPads or their phones or their iPods get really full, and so you don't have much memory left, and this can sometimes cause crashing when you use the app. One really important thing, and probably the most important thing of all of this that we're going to talk about today, is that you should never delete the app, because if you do that, then all of those nice pictures that you've got in your gallery will also get deleted unless you've got them backed up. So one thing is definitely back up all of your gallery onto your computer or some other storage system, but don't delete the app without making sure everything's backed up. It usually doesn't solve the problem. Really, the main thing is to try and create some space on your iPhone or iPod or iPad. Okay, so let's get back to what we're trying to do here. So yeah, in the top right you have options to upload your sketches, to access the community, and save your sketches and export them. So just click that and you'll be able to discover all of that. The thing that we're going to talk about really today is how to use the app to draw new pictures. And so a lot of the key tools that you're going to want to use are based here at this top part of the menu bar. And so this is where we can access pens, brushes, pixels, text, vectors. You can rub out things. You've got the eraser there, and there's lots of cool options there. So we'll go through some of those options as we go through over the next few minutes. And then the next key part, the menu that we're going to talk about is this part over here. So this isn't really about drawing things. This is more about how to manipulate the images that you've got. So there's undo and redo, which in a digital app is one of the cool things compared to trying to use analog methods. You can actually step back through your work process and to a bit that you were happier with. So that's quite a nice feature. I know some people don't like using undos, but it is a cool thing to do with the app. There's also layers, and layers are really important for being able to build up nice images, and talk about how you use those if you've not seen those before. There's modes, filters, transform. Transform's all about resizing parts of your image. And you can also load images into the canvas, including grids, and we'll talk about grids later. Another thing that is, so I've just used the undo there at the top left, and that allows me to get rid of those green things I've just put on the top. So one thing that people discover a little bit later usually is this thing here, which is just in the corner. It's got this kind of image of like a landscape. That is so cool. So what that does is it allows you to load reference images from your camera roll. So if you want to work from an image that's already been created, maybe it's a photo you've taken, maybe it's one you've downloaded from somewhere, you want to copy aspects of that, use it as a reference, then if you click on that, that will give you access to your photo stream. And so just as an example, I'll click on mine here, and what you can see is there's various pictures that are in my various photo streams. That selfie there is what I look like in real life, and then these other things are photos of my dog. So we'll go back to that later. Finally, at the bottom we have chat box, which is what I've clicked to start a stream. So the chat box down here will allow you to look at whatever is happening in the chat box. That's usually Mark or Sean talking in the chat box about whatever's happening today, or sometimes maybe Blackporn helping somebody. So there's various things that you can see from that, or you'll be able to stream from there as well. We also have these two big bars at the bottom. So this bar here this changes the size of the brush or the pen that you're using, and then this one here changes the opacity. So we'll just do that later on. And finally, just in the bottom right hand corner, you've got the palette, which is down here. So this allows you to load your own colour schemes, to edit that. So if you don't want to colour pick and you want to keep using the same colours over and over again, then you have an option here to be able to load your own palette. Okay, so that's the overview, and so what we'll do now is we'll start to use a few of the tools just to see how they basically work. So this isn't really going to be an art lesson. I'm not going to be drawing anything per se. I'm just going to be trying to highlight how some of the tools work. So I'll just get rid of that. So what I'm doing here is I'm showing you where the layers are. So on the top left, I've just opened this layer menu, and you can see that there's these different canvases here, and that's got various images on some of them that I've just shown you. And if I click on this eye symbol, then it makes things appear or disappear as I click them on and off. And so we'll talk about layers in a moment and why they're useful. Okay, so first thing is pen. So if you click on the tool at the top, you can see this pen tool. Actually, if you click, and this is true with a lot of things, if you click and hold, it makes something else happen than just showing you a menu. You actually, in this case, you get the bar appearing, the toolbar. So I'll click and hold and take that away. So this is the pen. By changing the size at the bottom, I can change the size of the pen, make it bigger and smaller. So this is all really, really simple. And then if I change the opacity, you can see that it gets fainter and stronger, depending on what the opacity is. So actually, with the pen, this is a particular pen where you can see it changes size depending on how fast I'm going. So if you go into the pen menu, which is next to the pen, you can see these slidey bars, and what you can see is there's various pen options. So I was actually using the option that was the thicker pen, so it changed the size as you move it. Now if you want to see how it really works, you click on this little symbol on the top left, the square with the pen symbol, and what you can see is that this is where the kind of control of that is. And so you have, in this case, an option called Simplify, and what this does is it changes the parameters of how the pen works. So if I go to the most basic pen in the menu, which is called Basic, so let me just clear all of this so it's easy to see. Right, so this is the basic pen, and I've got a line, and if I try and draw a circle, you can see it's fairly smooth. Now by changing this Simplify button, this will smooth out the line even more. So it basically makes it a lot more of a smooth circle. So it's really worth just experimenting with the tools and not just accepting whatever the basic parameters are And if you think you've changed it to the point where you can't get it to how it was before, you can just press reset and it takes it back to the default. And that's true of most of the other tools. Okay, so we've got pen. There's another tool here which I think SketchClub does so well, and that's this vector tool at the bottom. So with vector, you click and hold, and as you draw around, it will fill a shape. So it's a really good way of filling in large areas. There's some extra things that vector does that are actually really good. So if you click again on the sliders, you'll get a whole different set of options now compared to the pen tool. So one, for example, is gradient. So if I click on gradient, I'll change this colour to black because that green's horrible. So if I change this to gradient, if you see what happens now, you get a whole gradient across that shape that you've created. So this is a really good way of getting some nice effects. So just to give you an idea of the type of effects, the other thing is you can see I'm not very good at drawing circles. So to make that easier, there's another symbol at the top. So next to the sliders, you've got this wiggly white line symbol. So if I click on that, what you can see is now we have a series of shapes that we can use. So if I use the circle shape, and again I'm still in vector, I'm still in gradient. Now if I draw with this, it actually gives me the shape is a default shape, and so now if I let go, it automatically fills. So it can be ovals or it can be circles. So you have other options, obviously there's squares and triangles. So this is a really nice tool. The other thing you can do is you don't have to fill, so you could have no fill, and instead it creates a line. So this can be quite a good way of creating shapes. If I put it on freehand, now it acts just like a pen. Oh yes, vector erase. This is a good suggestion, Mark. So I'll just clear away everything that's there. So I'll put the fill back on, and so it's just going to create a shape. Here's a circle. Let's create a shape. Now, if we go into there's some more options when we use these tools. So you can see at the very bottom of this menu, you can see over, on, and erase at the very bottom of that. We're just going to talk about those today. Screen, multiply, and overlay. They're slightly different. It's probably better to get used to the tools first before getting into those. We've got over, on, and erase. Now, usually the default is that this is set to over. If you switch to on and erase, you get two other things happen. So we'll just talk about erase for now. So I'll just click on erase. And now watch what happens when I click on erase and draw around. I'll put it onto fill. So you can now cut away bits as well. So it's a good way of getting rid of lots and lots of text, or lots and lots of picture that you don't want on a particular layer. So one thing that can happen is you'll be trying to draw something, and normally you'll be expected to be able to draw a shape or whatever you're about to draw. But sometimes what happens is you would try and do that and nothing happens, and that's usually because one of these selections at the bottom has been changed from over to either on or erase. So if it's on and I try and draw, now nothing is happening. If it's on erase, nothing's happening until I go over an area that's already got something on it. So if you have a problem where it doesn't seem to be drawing, it's usually because you've clicked on one of these menu options at the bottom, and so just check that you're on over and you'll be able to get back to drawing again. Yes, I think everyone's done that. It's something that people sometimes post in the forum about why can't I draw anymore. So it's usually because that's been clicked. Okay, so we've talked about pen and we've talked about vector, and again, obviously with vector, if I'm drawing, if I change the opacity, it's not 100%. So now you can see layers of things building up. So it's nice, and I think there's a few people who use vector a lot. So one person who's used vector quite a lot is Unihorse. You've probably seen some of her sketches in the top gallery. So she uses vector to create those fantastical landscapes and images, where basically she'll draw the outline of an animal, whatever that is. Obviously I'm nowhere near as good as Unihorse at doing this, but then she will fill in with a different colour, and that will allow, it will create the kind of idea of whatever it is she's trying to draw, and she builds it up like that. So it's a particular style that when you see it you'll recognise it. Okay, so I'll clear all of that. So I keep clicking on this top menu on the left with the two pieces of paper, and that's taken me to a menu that I find really useful when I'm drawing. So obviously in analog you've got a single piece of paper and you've got your pen and you're just going to try and draw something, and that's what we've probably all grown up and got used to. So I can put down some shapes, I can make them bigger or smaller, get a picture, but it's not really making full use of the app. And what the app does that's really nice is it's got these, and if you're using any digital medium like Photoshop for example, you'll be used to layers, but layers are basically like transparent pieces of paper overlaying the bottom image that you've got, the bottom page that you've got. So when I draw in each of these layers, so by clicking on the menu at the top left, I get these pages that appear, and by clicking on each of these I can now build up different parts of an image. So I'm just drawing now with two different colours, and you can see I've got green and red, and at the moment the red is above the green in this menu. So if I swap this around, so I'm just dragging, I'm holding and dragging this down, you can see now the green appears in front of the red. So this is actually really useful because it allows you to do things that would be really difficult in a normal single piece of paper, to be able to create effects using the tools here. So I'll just give you an example. So let me just clear these away. So what I'm going to try and do is try and draw a sphere, and to give some sense that it's three-dimensional. So what I'll do is I'll use vector, I'll use the circle, so we'll build the basic shape, and obviously that's very two-dimensional at the moment. So what I'm now going to do is use one of the other tools on here, or one of the other modes on here that allows shading of this in a very simple, easy way. So I'm going to go back to freehand, because this gives me more control over where the colour goes. And now I'm going to try and put some shading on this. So I'll choose a lighter colour, and I'll go for pen, although later I'll show you how to do this with a brush. So if I just draw right now with pen over the top of this, it's fine, but if I get near the edge it goes over the edge. As you can see, that's not very, that's going to be quite hard. And for example, then it's going to be really hard for me to get that just right without sort of leaving the edges, so you can tell I've not quite got it right. Now there's this other one here called on. If I click on that, now as I draw across, you can see it never goes over the edge. It's always on the thing that I'm drawing on, as long as it's in the same layer. So for example, if I'm not on the same layer, if I'm on a different layer where there's nothing there, and I try and do the same thing, you can see it's in black now. It should be going, I'll change it to a different colour so you can see the effect. Nothing's happening because there's nothing to paint onto. If I go back to the layer I was on, and now I do it again, you can see that it's always on that layer. So this allows you to sort of section off parts of your image and to create the kind of smooth effects that you might want to create without affecting the background. Okay, so at this point we'll go and use another tool here which will help to create this shading effect much more effectively than using pen, and that's using brushes. So if you click on the brush menu, now what we have is a whole new world of possibility. There's loads and loads of brushes that people have made that you can make yourself. So there's some defaults, they're usually at the bottom, and then there's some that I've made myself. And so if I like a brush, what you do is you click on the brush and you have this option at the top to click on this star. Now if you click on the star, what that does is it moves the brush to the top of your brush menu. So then it will always be ready and easy to find. It's called actually. It's like a diffuse brush. So if I click on that, now I've got red as my selected colour. So I'm going to change the opacity down. And now as you can see, this is still in on mode. Now, as I paint, it's only staying on the circle. So if I reduce the opacity, you can see you can start to create the impression of something more three-dimensional, because it's all staying in the on. Now if I change the size, this will you just need to experiment. So I usually keep the brush big, and then I keep the opacity down, and it gives me more chance of gradually building up the colour. But really it's just about experimenting. So, but I think you get the idea. So I don't want to get sidetracked into trying to draw something. So there's something that looks like a 3D thing. It looks a bit strange on a black background, so what I can do is make the background a different colour. So I'll go to the layer below, and I will fill it. So if you go into colour fill, you can then fill it with whatever colour you want to select. So for example, I can choose red, or as I move this around, the colour changes as you do it, so whatever you want to do. So that's where we have used a vector tool to create a circle. So I've used vector, I used over, I used the circle to create a circle. Then I used a brush, in this case it was this diffuse brush, and I used it in on mode to then add colour to something on a particular layer. So that can allow you to very quickly build up images. If I like that sphere, for example, and I want more of them, then I can very efficiently make more. So I've got this layer with the sphere on, and I can copy it down. You can see copy down there, copy it down, and I've now got two. Obviously you can't see the other one because it's behind the first one. So what I can do is move it. So now we're going to use the transform tool, which you can see again here in this menu. So this is a really useful menu. So if I click on transform, what happens now is I have the option of moving this around. So you can see we now have two, and one's behind the other because one's in the layer behind the other. I might want to make that a different size. So if I again go to transform, I can just use my fingers to pinch this and change the size. So now we have two. The other thing you can do when you go into the tools menu, into the transform menu, at the bottom right of the screen, I don't know if you can see this on the stream, there's the option for actually precisely changing the size. So you have the option to use percentages to make it bigger or smaller by a percentage, and also to rotate it. So I'll just try and do that, and if you can see it, hopefully you'll be able to see what I'm doing. So I'll go again to transform. There's these cogs at the bottom right. I'm going to now change the size by a particular amount, so 200% makes it 200%, makes it twice as wide, and then I can rotate it, so for example 90 degrees, and then I'll move it back onto the canvas. So that's used. Oh, I tend to use it a lot, but it's very helpful. There's another thing that it does, and I'll just show you this now, just because this is a really neat tool. I think Mark's done this a lot and gets some really nice effects with this. So I'll just show you the transform, and if you click on tiled, you get almost like a mosaic of multiple images. So now if I change the size, you can see it builds up lots and lots of the same thing. So the tiled is quite a good way of getting patterns. Okay, so we've now got a busy picture with different layers. We've used the brush, and I'll show you how to make brushes in a moment. Whilst we're on this menu, just to look at some of the other features. You've got blur. So this allows you to selectively blur parts of your image. So if we zoom in So I'm just pinching this canvas in and out so you can really see some of the detail. I've got blur selected. I'm gonna the opacity determines the amount of blur you're going to get. So this acts just like a brush. So what you can see is as I go over that, you can see it all becomes very blurred. So just that one has become blurred, and the more you go over it, the more that will become blurred. So you can see. So that's one way of getting blur. There's the eraser, which acts like a pencil eraser. So now you can see I can rub bits out. If I reduce the opacity, it rubs out but not quite so harshly, so you have a lot of control over that. Fill will just be like if you're colouring something in. If you've got, I'll just show you now, just so you can see. I'll just create something new. So I'll just create a new circle, which is empty. So I'll turn down the fill. So what I'm going to do is create a circle, and I'm going to fill it. So if you just click on fill, and we'll change the colour. So I'll click the colour at the top, and you can just move this around and get whatever colour you want. And if you move the outer bar around, you can get different colours. And if you click on this set of boxes in the top right, you have other palettes that you can choose, including you can see what you've recently chosen. So we'll colour it in blue. Now if you click on fill, in the middle of that circle, it automatically just fills it all in. So that's quite useful if you're doing line drawings and you want to block fill areas. We talked about the pen pixels. Again, if you click on the sliders next to it, you get options for different types of pixels with insets, whether they're 3D or not. So you can see you can build up pixels. So if you change the size, you get different sizes and they'll overlay each other. The procedural menu contains lots of really cool tools. So for example, I use a lot the web tool, which is a bit like, it's good for sketching. It kind of fills in, so you can get quite a good sense of the picture you're trying to draw with some rough lines, and it will fill in, so you get some quite nice effects. Smooth and sketchier are similar, so you can fill in. But the thing that people use quite a lot in this tool is the bristles. So the bristles brush, if you see that mentioned in sketches, this is where you find it. So this is creating an oil painting type effect. So you can see it's smearing the picture a little bit. So if you go into the menu and this edit menu at the top left, the square with the little pencil, and click on that, you have the option of changing the parameters of this. So with the mixing, that will affect you can see the effect at the top, but as I increase the start of that, it increases the amount of smearing you're going to get, and the rate will also influence that. And you also have the option of having colours that it's going to bring across as well. I don't seem to be getting that right now for some reason, but you can also add colour to it, so you do get an oil paint type effect. So that's where bristles brush is. Select allows you to selectively move part of the image. You have to be on the right layer. So for example, if I'm in this blue layer here and I draw around a particular area, now I want to move that somewhere else, I have to use transform with select to be able to move this. So now if I go into the transform menu, I can now move that part of the sketch. So that's the select tool in combination with the transform tool. If I was on the wrong layer trying to do that, so I'll draw again an area and I'll try and transform this, you could see nothing happens. Sketchy, this is just again, it's just good for some rough sketches, and then you might go over that later. And smooth is similar, so these are kind of like pencils or rough pens. So they have particular effects, so it's good for getting a quick drawing done. Smudge I mean, it is what it says, but if you use the smudge, you can smear the paint. So the stronger the opacity, the stronger the effect. So if I reduce it right down, you can see it's much more subtle effect. So I use smudge a lot to get colours to mix together. So I might get a rough drawing done and then use smudge to kind of smear everything together a bit, and it creates some slightly new colours when you do this. You get some quite nice effects. That can be quite useful, especially if you're using it in the on mode, so that now all of the changes are confined to within the area rather than on a neighbouring area. So I'll just go to this sphere again just to demonstrate that. So we've got the sphere, I'm in on mode, I've got the smudge selected, and now if I smear this around, you can see it's restricted to within the sphere. So I'll just reduce the opacity there, but you can start to kind of mix things together. Okay, and then there's text. So if you want to write things, you can choose the text. So let me just, I was in on mode there, so it didn't do anything, so I'll just change it to. So there's various settings that you can use. So in this case, it's affected by the velocity. You can choose all of your fonts. There's an app called Any Font, which allows you to import extra fonts into your menu. So if you don't have all the fonts you're looking for, all the types you're looking for, you can get extra ones using this Any Font app, which costs 79p from the App Store. I'm not sure what that would be in dollars. So in this case, by turning off repeat, it will only write the word once. So there you go. What people find is that when they try and write, it can often be a little bit up and down. So what I do is I use the straight line tool, and that allows me to then get the line so it's a straight line rather than all wobbly. Or I might use the square tool, and then it will be horizontal to the canvas. Yeah, so the square tool if you want it level, exactly. So, cool. Okay, so we've gone through most of that menu. So one thing I said I would show you how to do is how to make brushes, which is really easy to do. So the thing with the brush menu is that when you look at the brushes, you can see lots and lots of brushes here. So some of these I've made, some of these I've downloaded. So if you want to download a brush, you just go to this plus sign at the top right, and this gives you the option to download from the community brushes. So if you click on one of these options here, like most downloaded for example, you'll see lots and lots of brushes that people have made over the last several years that you can download, and all you have to do is click on one of those and it will automatically download it to your menu. So I won't show you how to do that because, well, I have shown you how to do that. I won't do that because I've already got most of these brushes. So the alternative is to make your own, and so you might have a photo that's on your camera roll of a brush, that you've got from Photoshop, for example. So you can use that, or you can make your own. So I'll just roughly do one here. So this is like a smoke brush that I've downloaded. So it was in the most downloaded menu actually. This one, I just saw it. So it's actually where is it? Anyway, it's a cloud type brush. So if we build up a picture like this, you can see I've got something there now which I might want to make a brush from. I'll use the erase and selectively get rid of bits of it just to create an effect. Right, so I want to turn that into my own brush. So all I do is I go to these slider bars at the top, I click on the plus, and then it gives me the option to create a brush from the selection. So I just click on that, and now that is now a brush. So I'll make it a star at the top, so it's now going to be at the top of my menu. I will need to edit this because at the moment, if you look at this brush, it's a bit rubbish when I use it. So at the moment it looks like it's creating these straight lines, so I'll just make it bigger. So it's creating an effect, but it's not. Maybe it looks a bit like a snakeskin effect, but that's not the effect I wanted. So I can edit this brush. So I go to the slider menu, and I go to the square with the pen at the top left, and I can now start to change the parameters of it. So one thing is to change the scatter, for example, change the spacing. So this gives me the option to create effects. So at the moment it's going to look a bit more like a smoky brush. To give it a bit more randomness, I can click on this randomize button, so this now swaps the orientation with every single time it appears. This will make it look a bit more like maybe some clouds, because obviously clouds don't look very regular. So now it's a bit more random. If you change, for example, the flow, this makes them appear darker or lighter. So if you go for the jitter option here, this is where you can introduce randomness into your brush. So I'll just bring them all together so you can see it. So now if I change the flow here, you can see the effects. Some of them will be darker and lighter than the others. So that's quite useful for creating cloud-like effects. Rotation will be random, size will be random, spacing will be random. So now we have a very random brush. So it's well worth experimenting when you create a brush to get the effects that you're looking for. If you don't like all of that, you can always just click reset, which if you, let me just see how you do that actually. So if I go back, press back and click on the brush. So one thing actually, yeah, so if you click on the brush and hold it, you get a series of options. So one thing you can do is upload it to the community. You can copy it, you can rename it, or in yellow there you can reset it back to its defaults, or you can even delete it. So if you're not happy with the brush, it's very easy to get rid of. So that's where you go into your menu and you just click and hold on to it, and you get the option to, you could email it to somebody, you don't have to upload it to the community, whatever you want to do. So all the options are there. But yeah, when I make brushes, so a lot of these brushes in here are brushes that I've downloaded, but some of them I've made. So you can see here, for example, there's a whole series of tree brushes that I've made, and these are from photos that I took of obviously trees in winter, and they're actually from photos, and you can see the edge of the photo there, and I was able to not really trace around them, but I was able to get this tree effect. But really I'm trying to make them look a bit random, a bit more like a forest, and so to do that you want them to be different opacities, you want them to be different sizes, and so that randomness is what gives it more of the forest effect. If it was just a line of the same size thing, it wouldn't look very real. You know, if it was just like that, it wouldn't look really like a forest. So what I always go for is multiple different things of the same type, and it builds up an image that looks a bit more real. Obviously this is a little bit rough and ready at the moment, but you get the idea. The other thing with the brushes is the orientation. So at the moment they're all appearing in random directions, which makes them very hard to control. So there are options with follow, I think, that allows you to change the angle of them, and then also when you draw, it will also orientate them with respect to the canvas. So by changing this follow option and canvas relative, it will get them to be facing the direction you expect. So you just need to experiment with that a bit, and you'll ultimately get what you want. Okay, so that's a load of branches there. So again, using it on, for example, I can give them different colours. So you can start to build up shading within them, and so it's all confined just to where the branches are. So this is quite a nice way of creating an effect and then getting some subtlety into it. So the on, I use on so much for that. Okay, so what else do we need to know about? So I've managed to delete that sphere that I made before, so I'll just make another one quickly. Oh, it wasn't filled, so I'll just fill that. Okay, somebody's just fallen over, don't worry. let me just shade that. So I'll get an effect. Okay, so we've got something that's shaded there. You know how that. Okay, so now we're going to talk about these modes, and what I think I've got the sketch upside down here, so it should be that way up. Let me just turn that around so it's the right way up. I'll just rotate it. Okay. Alright, so we've got this sphere. So there's all of these modes here. So when I go into layers, I'll just get rid of these because these are annoying me looking at those. Okay, so I've got this sphere, and you can see on the right you've got all of these options here. So multiply, screen, overlay, darken line. These are all again very useful modes that you really just need to experiment with. So I'll just show you what they do. So if I copy down, so I often do this, I'll copy down the image I've got, and I'll use in order for a mode to work, it has to be applied to a layer above the layer you want to affect. So I'll click on this upper layer, and now hopefully what you'll see is, as we go through these modes, you'll see the effects of them. So multiply, screen, overlay, darken, lighten. So some of them don't seem to have any effect, others really do. Dodge. But dodge is used to make a glowing effect. This is really burnt out. I'll show you about how to use that in a moment. Burn, soft light, that's a good way of getting shading, making things darker. Hard light's a bit more. This difference and exclusion only work when you have multiple layers for it to work on. But you can get some really psychedelic effects with those. Hue is where you might want to change the colour. So if I just go into a different colour, and I'm going to use the on mode. So I'm now again on this diffuse brush. Let me just get back to that brush. So I'm on the upper layer, I'm on hue mode, and I'm on, so it's only going to be drawing on that sphere. And now as I go over it, you can see it's changed the colour. So this is a very efficient way of changing the colour of something on the layer below. So what else have we got? We've got saturation and colour. Again, that's even better, as you can see. And then luminosity and on. So actually with on, so for example, if I've got an empty layer and I'm now going to draw, I've got a click to over, so whatever I draw here will only appear where it's on the layer below. So if I just show you what I mean by that, if I just go to normal, just to show you. Right, I'm going to draw a line. Let me just do it so it's more strong. So you can see that line is everywhere at the moment. If I click that layer to on, it's now only on. It's only appearing where it's on top of the layer below. So again, that can be quite a useful way of building up colours within a confined area that you want. Okay, so let's go back to this. So dodge is something where you get this glowing effect. Basically, the lighter the colour you apply to this layer, the more, the brighter it will be. So if it's really pale, it will be glowing. If it's really black, it will go back to normal. So dodge is a quick way of getting a glowing effect. Okay. So what I tend to do is when I'm drawing, I'll get a picture that looks maybe like this. I'll think, oh, that doesn't quite have the right shading, it's not quite bright enough, dark enough, glowing enough, whatever it is. And so then I'll just tend to experiment with all of these modes, and often you start to get effects you hadn't quite thought you were going to get, but you actually prefer. And so it's definitely well worth experimenting with this. So it doesn't have to be the same picture above. I could just, for example, just draw. Let me just see, why is this not working for me? Okay, so yeah, I'm just drawing randomly here. It's getting an effect, and so now if I start clicking through the effects, you can see there's all sorts of strange effects happening here. So it really depends on what you're trying to achieve. That's quite nice. Okay, so I think that was most of the tools. Oh yeah, the thing we've not talked about is filter. So we've talked about the modes, which are all of these here. The other thing that we have is this filter menu, and this has got a lot of really neat effects, which are only applied to the layer that you're on. So you can merge everything. So for example, if you click on a layer, you can merge it down and merge it down, and so it will build up. Now what you've seen with that is that I've just now lost the effect that I had. So one way of overcoming that is instead you have to merge everything together, and so in order for this to work you need to have an empty layer or a layer at the bottom that you're going to merge to. So it has to be at the very bottom of the image of this layer stack. So I've put an empty layer there. If you don't have any free layers, I've built up all of this stuff here, so I've not got many layers left. So if you want extra layers, just click this plus at the top and you create more layers. So it's usually 30 or 40 layers that you could have on one sketch. So if I go to the very bottom now you can see you have options to have merge visible or merge all. So now if I click on merge visible, that's not worked. If instead I go to merge all, now everything's now on one layer and it's retained the look. The problem with doing that is that you've obviously now lost the ability to do that selective editing on different layers. So I tend to, if I'm going to do something like that, I will save where I'm up to. And this is something worth doing anyway. I'm usually saving every 10-15 minutes anyway. And if you want, you can save copies. So when you click on save, you'll see the menu where it says save. If you hold the save button instead of just clicking it, it will give you the option to save a copy. So I usually do that. If I'm just about to merge everything together, I don't want to lose where I've, in case the layers were useful, I might think that I've made a mistake by merging it. I'll just save a copy. But in this case, I'll just merge it all together. So now you can create some effects. So in filters, this is all going to happen on this layer. So if I click on the filter menu, there's loads of different options here. So I use noise a lot. It creates a kind of speckled effect. It kind of brings everything together. So the more you change the slider, the more effect you will get. There's useful things such as, you just have to experiment with this, but for example, there's blur. That will create a smooth blur over everything. There's Gaussian blur, there's motion blur, so if you want to create something that looks like it's moving in a particular direction, you can do that. So the directionality of it. And then when you press done, then that's what's created. So a couple of other tricks are, for example, if you want to just fill a layer in instead of trying to draw it all in and colour it all in, with vector or something, this would take ages to kind of fill the whole layer in. Instead, you just go to colour fill here and then fill it with whatever colour it is you want. So that's really good. There's a nice trick with vector, where if you go into vector and I make it square and then use the gradient fill, you can create a gradient across the image, and so that can create quite nice backgrounds. But really, I think oh yeah, so the other thing I said I would cover for some people was they wanted to know about grids and how you use grids. So I think that's all of the tools, unless anybody's got any other suggestions. Main thing is just to play around, and I think you'll figure it out. But really, all the key stuff is at the top. The palette at the bottom right, I can't quite see it because the stream thing's in the way. But if you click on the image at the bottom right, you'll see a palette of colours. You can change those. If you click on the colour, you'll get the colour wheel coming up, and you can change them to whatever colour you want. The other thing you can do is obviously use a reference. So this is a really useful tool within SketchClub. So if I click on this picture at the top left, this panorama image, you now get to see the camera roll that you have. So if you click on that, you can see some images. So this is actually the dog that you heard before. That's actually what he looks like. So now we have a picture, and you can change the size of that. It sits over the top of your canvas. What you can't do is trace it, because obviously it's in the way. So it's not really there to be used for tracing. It's really just there to use for comparison. Let me just get rid of this stuff. Okay, so we've got a picture that we want to draw. So what you could do is use, for example, the sketchy tool. You might want to just have a go at drawing it as it is, and that would take some time to get right. So I'm just kind of blocking it in. So that's one way of doing it. If you want to get the colours exactly as they are in the picture, all you do is you click your finger or your stylus on the picture at the particular point, and as you move it around you can see it's picking the colour. So you could do that to actually get the colour so it's just right. So that's one way of doing it. So it's however you want to work, really. So that's how I would try and draw, is to roughly block it in and try and draw it. The alternative is, and what some people do and I've done, is to use grids to try and get the proportions just right. And somebody was asking me to show how to do that. So if you want to use a grid, what the idea of the grid is it kind of partitions up the whole image to break it down into individual parts to make it easier to draw. So I'll just show you how to do that. So that's the reference image I want to use. So first of all, I need to get a grid onto that reference image, and that will allow me to then have a similar grid on my picture and allow me to then copy across. So the first thing is to get a grid. So we go to the Layers menu, you go to Load Image, and in Load Image you can now load a photo into there and trace it directly if you want to. That would show up in the stats as an image load, which is fine, but obviously people know you've traced it. If you want to push yourself a bit more and have a go at trying to draw it from scratch, then instead you can use grids as one example. So if you go down the menus, you can see the grids option. There's loads of other things in there. There's loads of backgrounds in there that you can use. So if you go into grids, you now have lots and lots of different grid options here. So one grid that a lot of people seem to use is this one called Grid by Pastor Bob. It's this green one. The reason why they use that is because the grid is green, but the holes are transparent, so your image will show through. So I'll click on that. It's now going to download. So actually, I moved it there, which was not a good idea. So I'll just do that again because I don't want to move it. I'll just accept it when it loads. So I'll just show you that again. So I'll go down to the Grid by Pastor Bob. It's now going to load. I'll just say done. So now I have a grid. So at this point I would save it. So you've got it on your saved sketches. Now I need to have the photo behind that so I can see it. So yeah, you can load an image on the layer and trace if you want to. There's no problem with doing that at all. This is just a different way that people do this. So I'm going to move the grid up, and now at the bottom layer I'm now going to load the actual image I want to draw. So I'll load image again, and in this case I'm going to go to the image I want to use. So here it is, the dog. So now I have a grid overlaying the dog. So the next step is to save that. So I'm going to export that as a JPEG, and that will save in my, I'll click on Save Image, that will now save in my camera roll. So what I would now normally do is start a new sketch, import that grid, so that now I don't have an image load in my canvas, and it's starting again. But just for quickness, I'll just show you what the effect is of what I've just done. So I now click on this panorama thing now. You can see I've now got the picture of the dog with the grid overlaid, and that grid is the same grid that I've got on my sketch. So all I have to do now is try and carefully replicate where all of those bits of dog are in the right square, and this is why I don't usually do it, because it's really difficult for me to get this right. So you're counting grids, and I'm probably already going to get this wrong straight away, but I can't even see where I'm up to. So okay, so we've got a bit of dog there, and it goes down. I think I'm already one square off. Let me just 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. 2, 3. Yeah, I think that's right. And then it goes down a bit, and then it goes down across here a bit. It cuts off that corner, and it goes round. So as you can see, this isn't something that you do in like 5 minutes. This is going to take us. So I've already given up trying to go with the grid, but you get the idea. So you'd be basically looking to see wherever that grid is, and you'd be trying to sort of follow it so it follows exactly the right square. Anyway, you get the idea. Somebody wanted to know how you do that, but that's all you do. Yeah, I always mess up with grids as well. So, but I would say that the feature to be able to see the reference image, to colour pick it if you want to, is really, really helpful, because it means that you can much more closely match what you're trying to see. I'm just using the sketchy tool here, and you can see it's filling in quite well. People use all sorts to do this. So some people go straight with brushes, people use vector. You know, if I use vector, for example, it's in obviously whenever you change the parameters, it remembers them for next time. So if it's not quite doing what you expect, you need to just go and check. So I'll just go back, and you can see, you know, it'd be quite easy to kind of block in the shape of the dog quite quickly. But anyway, you get the idea of how it works. Yeah, I'm always a column off as well. So I think that's it. I think really I think we've gone through how to save, how to start new things, and then really most of the rest is just experimenting with the tools and the brushes, and download some of the community brushes. There's loads of really cool ones. I think the basic ones that you start off with are quite good just for getting going, but I found I've not used most of them after the first go, whereas you know, there's a lot of community brushes in there that create specific effects, especially things like cloud effects, fire effects, stone effects, and so that can be quite useful for getting some quite nice textures. So I'm just going to get rid of the grid that you can see there. But you know, once you've got a brush that you know creates specific effects, you can get quite stylized results. So, and I'm using it on a lot when I'm doing this, because it really allows you to sort of shade areas really quickly. So it's quite nice, I think, to create new effects. So I'm now just rambling. I think I've finished. Does anybody have any questions? Is there anything that we've not covered that we should have covered? Given that everybody here is already a good artist, I'm assuming you already know all this stuff anyway. But is there anything that you think we should cover? Nope. Okay. Alright. Thanks everyone, and I'll see you around. Oh yeah, flip. No, just before I go, yeah, flip. This little arrow just at the top in the middle flips the image. So that's really good if you're checking to see if it looks right. So you know, if I'm doing a portrait, if I flip it, suddenly it looks really rubbish. I know I've got something out a little bit, maybe the eyes are in the wrong place. So that can be really useful. Similarly, yeah, exactly, Mark just said that. So sometimes I flip that at the very beginning and not realised. And so I've done my drawing, and then when it uploads, it's the opposite way around. That's really annoying. So just, you can tell that when you look in your layers, because the layers here show you the actual way around it's going to get uploaded. So if you want to avoid that happening, you need to pay attention to that. if you've managed to do that and it's all the wrong way around, or you actually want to swap it so it's the other way around, then all I do is I merge it all together, so it's all now a single layer. I then transform it and flip X, and now it's the opposite way around, and so then it will restore the direction you wanted. Oh yeah, and the tap 3-4 fingers stuff. I've never quite worked this out, but let me just see. Oh yeah, so 3 fingers made it go to full size. I don't even. I obviously can't do this properly. Actually, end up in a different app when I did that. So I think obviously I think it's all about restoring canvas to the right size and the right orientation. Yeah, okay. And there's these things at the top. You can see it's like a magic wand effect, and there's a cross effect. The cross takes you to the transform, and the magic wand takes you to filters. So they're just shortcuts to get to those useful tools. Okay, so I think maybe I should upload this drawing. I think that's shows just how far wrong you can go if you use too many tools all in one sketch. Okay, thanks everyone.